Okay, so in today's lesson, we're going to be doing a type of solving called completing the square. Okay, now this comes up actually a lot more in physics and some in year 13 calc. It's a little bit easier to use than the quadratic formula. Okay, so it's very situational. For our year, probably quadratic formula is the most common, but again, if you go on to year 13 and a few subjects, knowing the squared, how to complete the square is a very good skill. So the first of all, completing the square, we'll just review what is actually a squared quadratic. So that means originally, if you started off with something like x plus 6 squared, okay, so that's a squared quadratic. When I expand this out, what do we see? Well, so we got x plus 6 times x plus 6, right? And we do our claw, x squared plus 6x plus 6x, and then finally plus 36. Okay, and when we simplify that, x squared plus 12x plus 36. Now, when we compare this to the original thing that we were actually squaring, what do we see that's happened? Well, out of my x plus 6, I see that this is the number that's been squared, right? So this is squared. This is actually 2 times the number. You know, this is x plus c. 2 times that number. Okay? So this is something that we do when we complete the square. We can see that, all right, if I have this set up, that means that this is the result of something that's been squared. So if you have something like x squared plus 14x plus 49, well, is this a squared quadratic? Well, the square root of this is 7, and the middle value, right, that squared is, the square root of that is 7, and 7 doubled is 14. Right? So that means that the original equation is x plus 7 squared. Okay? So it's always, we're looking at this combination, right? This is something squared, and that's double that number. Okay? So, taking this forward. So now completing the square technique. Completing the square solving. Completing the square technique. Sounds more sophisticated, especially if I spell it right. Technique. All right. All right, so completing the square technique. So you start off, when I look at this, so I start off with x squared, let's say, plus 6x, I'll say minus, minus 5 equals 0. Okay, so how do I square root this? It's not, so what I do is I isolate this part here. Okay, so step one, isolate the x squared plus blank x. Okay, so that means I'm going to move this part over to the other side. Okay, so this gives me x squared plus 6x, and I'm just going to leave a space here, equals 5, right? Minus 5 on this side becomes plus 5 on that side. Okay. Now, next, if this was a squared, right? that means that my original number would have to be x plus, now that means that this is, again, we're always thinking this is x plus c, some constant. Now this must be the result of 2 times c. Now if that's the case, that means I just have to have this number, half of b. So half of that is 3. Now that should be what the bracket is. Okay, squared. Okay. Now, if this is, remember, if that one is 2 times, and then the last part, our normal c value, right, is this constant squared. So I'm going to add, in the next step, I need to add a constant, which means just a number, nothing with x, just a constant. Add a constant that completes the square. And again, when we're doing this, we're looking for c squared. So in this case, this would have to be c squared, so 3 squared, that would have to be a 9. I'd have to add 9. Okay? Now, and again, you could test that out. I can expand this one. X plus 3 squared. You know, it will make x squared plus 6x plus 9. Okay? However, we can't just randomly add a number to one side. What we add, okay, so what is added to the right-hand side, you also have to add to the left-hand side to keep it even. So what you add to the right-hand side, you must add to the left-hand side. Okay, so if I added 9 here, then I also have to plus 9 to this side. Okay, so now what do we have? This one I write as the square. Okay, and then I put this side together. Equals 14. All right, so now, I don't like that at all. I'll redraw that. Okay, so now technically they're both still even. But again, our goal is to find out what is x. So, next step. Let's see how much room I have here. Okay. Oh, that goes there. All right, so the next step, so this is what I'm working with. So step 4. I square root both sides. Okay. Square root both sides. Now when you do this, now the square root of something squared is just itself. That's not a big deal. So on this side, I'm left with x plus 3. On the other side, equals, you have square root of 14. Now, you can leave this as square root 14 if you want for now. You can make it a decimal, but of course, usually it's ugly. So it's just better to leave it as square root. Now, remember what we said when we were rearranging equations. If I'm undoing a square, an even power, then the root must be plus or minus. Now, this makes sense because we know in a quadratic, you always need 2 solutions. Okay? So step 5, isolate x. So that just means taking this 3, I'm going to move it over to the other side. So now it'll become negative 3. So x equals negative 3 plus or minus root 14. Now you can't actually leave the solutions in this form. It does work. However, a lot of other questions want you to carry on. So with your calculator, you would solve for those other answers. And then again, just round to 2 dp and then state that. Okay? So find the